Hi everybody, in this video I'm going to show you how to make an exposed spine book like this. This particular binding goes by a bunch of different names. I tend to call this a 4-needle book because most of the times I've done it, I need 4 needles because I've done 4 series of stitches. But realistically, you can do this with as many series of stitches as you would like, as long as it is an even number, right? So on this book, I did 2, 4, 6. I could call this a 6-needle book. I could do more than that. Basically, you're just kind of limited by your materials and your own time. In this video though, I want to show you a couple of different considerations and a few things you can do to get set up to start making your book. So let's start with supplies first. I need the paper I'm going to use for the interior of my book. In this particular case, I've set out 5 groups of, how many pieces of paper did I do? 5 groups of 4 pieces of paper. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I can do 6, I can do 7, 8, as many as I want to. What I'm going to do though is I will fold these in half, and each of these folded areas will become one folio. It's spelled F-O-L-I-O, or basically one little folded chunk like each of these in the book. So the fold is what will be the thing you sew through. So I've got this paper. Usually I'd want to worry about grain, but this is what I've got, so I'm actually going to fold it against the grain. I hope you forgive me. But I want to make sure to fold this all at once. I don't want to fold individual sheets. I just want to group them and fold them by folio. So I'm going to go ahead and do that with this one. Let's see. And I'm going to try really hard to make sure I line this up. And then I like to start from the middle and fold outwards, and voila, I have a folio. Now, once I've got that initial crease, I do want to come in, and if I have my bone folder, excuse me, I was rattling around in my toolbox for a second. If I have a bone folder or if I have a pencil, just something hard and plastic, I just want to make that crease a little bit tighter. And I'm actually going to do it. Since I have a bone folder, I'm going to do it with that. So you can see I've got a nice sharp crease now. The reason I want to fold all of these pages at once is because this exterior sheet of paper, if you can see, it looks like all of the pages are not lined up entirely. This exterior sheet has to travel a farther distance around that crease than the piece in the middle has to travel. And so one of the hallmarks of a handmade book is that you can see the differences in page length. And it's very, very minute, but it's there. If you hate that look, you can, of course, square this up, take a ruler and a blade and cut that off. But I kind of like it. It kind of shows that it's handmade, which is always nice. And so I will do that for the next series of papers. Again, I'm only doing about 5 at a time. I'm just gonna do this one. I won't show you guys all of these on camera because it'll get really boring really quickly. Make sure my crease is sharp. Great. And what I'll do is as I make these, I'll stack these up off to the side and I'll be able to see how my book is being built. Usually you wanna do, it depends on the width of your paper or the thickness or weight of your paper. Usually you want to do at least 5 pages. I'd say 4 is kind of the absolute minimum. There is an exception to that, which I will show you here in a second, but you need enough paper so that you'll end up with a large enough crease that you can see your stitching. So for instance, with this book that I showed you before, I did, I don't know, let me count these real quick. This one I have 1, 2, 3, only 4 sheets of paper. This paper's a little bit thicker. And then with this one, I think I did something very similar. But what I'll do is I'll go through and I'll make however many folios, however many pages I want for my book. But I will do the rest of this off camera. Another item I'm going to want to make in preparation is I want to take a sheet of paper the same size as what I'm making my folios out of. It doesn't have to be the same type of paper. If you're using expensive paper, you can just like grab a piece of notebook paper as long as it's the same dimension. And I want to make sure to create a template for myself. So on this one, notice I folded it by itself, but it's the same size as the folios I just made. I'm gonna make note of my top right exterior, my top right interior, because what I'll do is I'm going to be punching my holes that I'll be sewing through along this spine. And this will give me a good template and good exact idea where I need to punch each hole. So be prepared, prepare this, it'll make your life a lot easier. And then I'm gonna make sure I have my sort of usual bookbinding supplies. I have my embroidery floss for stitching. Of course, you can also use linen thread, but use what you got. I have an awl. You, of course, can also use a nail. I have snips. Regular sewing snips are great. And then I have needles. So I have 4 needles here. I actually have 6 set out because I think I'm going to make my book a little, maybe I'll keep it simple. I'm just going to stick with 4 for this one. You will need to make sure that you work with at least 4 at one time. That helps keep your stitches stable as you progress through. You can always work down in a series. It's best if you do this all at the same time, but you can always work 4 and then come in and put another 2, but it's a lot easier if you just take care of everything all at once. That'll make more sense, I promise, in the next video. But I do want to show you guys a couple other considerations with things. So why would you have more stitches like this? Why does this one only have 4? Why does this one have 6? Why do some other books have more than that? The basic rule of thumb is that the bigger your book gets, whether it's lengthwise, so this direction, or the thicker it gets, so the more folios you get, the more rows of stitches you'll want to put in. This book I didn't bind particularly carefully, but you can see there's quite a bit of wiggle, or you could call it slop even, in this. This book is not going to have a very long lifespan. It's not going to be very durable. Does it look cool? Yeah, it looks cool, and I'm happy with it the way it is, but it's just not very durable. This book, on the other hand, if I try to bend this spine isn't going anywhere. This is a lot more carefully bound. It's a lot tighter. It's also going to be a lot more durable. I also have what is a failed example. It's a really good bad example to show you guys. So there's kind of a long story behind this book, but the short story is that I did this for a project when I was in college. I took, one of my favorite classes I ever took was an art history class, and it was all about illuminated books and manuscripts. So it was a lot of ancient books, basically. And so the final project for this class was to make your own illuminated manuscript. And you guys will see that my binding fell apart. This is well over a decade old at this point, and it was not made with longevity in mind. But this is a really great example of how if you are using thick paper, you can get away with using one sheet per folio. Of course, I used, let's see, I'll use this one as an example. I used just thread. I used a single line of just regular old sewing thread. That apparently was way too light for something that's made out of watercolor paper. And maybe you can kind of hear the heft of this. It's quite thick, right? But I was able to get away with using only one piece per folio. But then of course, I did not do a great job binding it. I used much too weak of a material for the spine, and so it's completely disintegrated over time. I show this to you guys because I don't want this to happen to you. At some point, you know, I really like this. I'm still kind of proud of this project, but I will come back in and I will rebind this. It just hasn't happened yet. In general though, you want to make sure that you are using thinner paper, using multiple pieces of it, and certainly enough that you're able to see the folds and you're able to see each individual folio. The last consideration I want to throw at you in this video is what you want to make a cover out of. With a book like this that you're spending quite a bit more time binding, it's really nice to have a cover on your book. These are both soft cover. This one's a little bit heavier. I think this might actually be Bristol board. I don't remember off the top of my head. This one is just a fancy art paper that's a little bit heavier weight, a little bit more durable. You could probably get away with using some type of watercolor paper, but if you don't necessarily have something fancy at hand, there are some other really great options too. One of these being good old brown paper. This is the top to a grocery bag, and this is what I'm going to use as the exterior of my book. To cut this down to size, I'm going to show you how to measure this real quick. So I've got my template here. What I want to make sure I do is have my template unfolded so I have an entire sheet of paper. And I will need to come back in. I did a very rough cut of this down at the edge, but I'm going to come back in with my ruler and a blade and cut this down nicely to size. I want to unfold my template and make sure that I have at least another 2 inches on the other side of it. So for me, that's 2 inches would be about here. I'll come out and square this out later, but hopefully you can see where I'm drawing. So I've got, and then I want to make sure I've got 2 pieces of this as well. So what I can end up doing is something like this, where I have one piece of paper that's folded in half, and then I can bind an extra length around my first and last folio. So this gets kind of tricky to see because it's all bound up, but I'll cut this down. I'll show you guys in the next video what I mean by this exactly. If you see, this is all one sheet of paper. It's folded in half, but I need an extra tail to keep it bound within the book so it won't rip out. So if you have a big chunk of paper, take one of your folio templates and set it down, measure it out, and cut it out. I'm gonna go ahead and do this. I'll show you the finished product in the next video. Hopefully that'll make a little bit more sense. Yeah, so I'm gonna leave this video here.